I moved to Jersey a few months ago, and I'm very excited to be working with KrypC. And what KrypC does is we try to bridge the gap for adoption of the blockchain for the regular industry. So I am going to take you through basically what we've been working with in the Indian market, and we believe is also relevant in other markets, and how we can bring the blockchain. So to me, the blockchain is almost like the internet without the web. So if we don't really have a mechanism for bringing it to the individual and making differences in our lives, it will continue to be like the internet. I remember prior to the World Wide Web using data and going to Gopher, but it didn't change my life. And this is the way we hope we can really reach to the common man. So what we're trying to do is really understand how the real problems can be solved using the distributed ledger technology, and having those transactions have improvement in efficiency. So one of the, we've been looking at electronic health record, capital markets, asset, so the transfer, and one of the ones that we've been looking at very closely is the automotive finance industry. In India, and I'm sure everywhere else in the world, you, as a dealer, you have to order cars. You have to provide to the dealer, to the manufacturer, evidence that you have the right credits. And once you receive those cars, there needs to be financing and there's capital around that. So what we're trying to do is to using decentralized private ledgers, so looking at the process of being really permission, you have to be permission, and looking at the data. And it's not about having everything in the blockchain, but having the relevant information to create the trust into the ecosystem. So this, we believe, will provide not only tangible benefits to the lenders, but even to the supply chain for automotive. So it's really creating the framework that allows for data to be available. So in terms of participation into the ecosystem, we believe that there is going to be, of course, the manufacturer, the dealership, the lenders, the registration authority, government. Insurance companies can become a player in that, and also the automotive buyers. In terms of what I'm taking you to today, it's going to be more around the benefits that can be seen just around the interaction between the manufacturer and the dealers. So this gives clear evidence of the credit limit availability. You can also have the shipment be visible, because once the order has been received, you can actually start looking at that being visible. Now, one of the things, the reason why we believe the banks will be benefiting from that is the collateral. And we know as a fact that in India, what they have to do, the banks have to do, is they have to send their representative on a regular basis to make sure that they can tag the collateral which are against them. Because sometimes the dealers will use the same car against two credit lines. And then finally, by having the permission base, you can now start doing record sharing and even messaging and making sure, because somebody could say, well, I sent you an email asking for this order, and why is it not being delivered? Because we do know that sometimes the manufacturers themselves delay. They get into a bit and then they delay the delivery. So the process that we're looking at today is really around the dealer financing. So by what we're looking is at not trying to boil the ocean, but really provide visibility into pieces of the interaction. And ideally, this also allows the businesses to sort of use their HR their systems that already have, their ERP systems, and or if they're using spreadsheets. Sometimes you'll have where they don't have a system, it will give them the ability to spearhead themselves in there. So they can, from a manufacturer's point of view, they can see the credit limit, because right now in India, we have evidence where they actually have a person spending the whole day just checking that the limits are there. And to be able to give those limit access, the dealership have to give them access to their system. So think about it from a securitization point of view, security, you're giving people access to your system that you may not even know, and so you don't know what could happen from there. That also gives them the ability to accept any indent, so any orders that come through. They can raise the invoices against those indent and then publish the details of the shipments of the cars. Now, from a standpoint of the dealership, they have a flexible way of really putting the orders through, requesting information, and then they get the confirm of the shipments of the cars. And what we have been, so we've been working actually with a software vendor, so we're not working directly only with the OEM or the dealers, but one of the things that we know is that the banks now will have the ability to not only receive the VIN also of the cars, so which means once you have it on the blockchain, the dealer cannot try to say, okay, this one belongs to Bank A and it also belongs to Bank B, and we're hoping that you will see savings in terms of the interactions that are necessary for the lack of trust. Now, of course, as I mentioned, there are many other processes that can be, we can look at doing, which would remove friction, such as the loan approval for individuals. You can then also do the registration, so APIs going back to the registration of the government. You can track the sales of the dealers, and now they can actually quickly relieve the collateral again, so their credit line can actually be on a live thing. So the car walked out, so now I've got another X amount available. We foresee also insurance coverage being something possible. And finally, even messaging, because one of the things that you can be sure with the blockchain is once it's been written, it can't be removed. So you might as well make use of it instead of emails, because sometimes we can say, oh, the email didn't make it. So we believe there's a lot of opportunity in the industry around this, and it's really going to be control of collateral of asset is a big one that we see. So even though there's an ease to doing business, there's also a financial result out of that. And all the delay that we see in the sales closure, in the lack of trust, and so really the transparency that you receive from the blockchain is what is going to be making it more of an ideal. So it's not about shoving everything onto the blockchain, but shoving the information, which is important to create the trust within parties. Now, actually, so I talked about the fact that it's not just about the industry, and I think it's great the industry does it. So a couple of weeks ago, my team and I, we participated in the FinTech for Good. And one of the things that we did, and I want to leave you with this, was really we were asked to do something which would have enable positive change and empowerment irregardless of socioeconomics, and asking for the trust to be built on. And so what we did is we actually created a prototype using the blockchain for co-ops. So the idea is, so probably in Jersey, it's not a problem. In Africa, we know that about 50%, and this is UN number, 50% of the crop value never makes it back to the farmer. And a lot of that is around the lack of transparency. The price data is not available, and there are, in some cases, corruption happening. So ideally, what we're looking to do, what we proposed as a solution, was for the farmers to be provided with the technology to deliver, so they deliver the grain or the goods, it gets recorded into a blockchain. That information then goes along and lets them know when it has been sold. So there is no mistake, no argument. So if there's an agreement that 20% needs to go back to the co-op, that's what goes back, but they know what they're getting back. And with this, we hope we will be able to allow them to really empower themselves and be able to get into the financial ecosystem. So thank you.
Question for you, Genevieve. why do this on the blockchain? Why do you need a distributed ledger at all for the car thing? Why not just a centralized software as a service? The trust thing isn't a big issue for OEMs to dealers.
It is, actually. I would tend to disagree, because what we've actually found is there is a delay in payments, because what the dealers will sometimes do is make use of the same credit line or delay, the funding that they have, so there's a delay in that. So I don't believe that the trust is fully there. And also the other thing is that we're not asking for every transaction to be there. It's more the hashtagging of the transaction, so something has happened, so that the next thing, there's no need to check, has it really happened?
But if you don't put the VIN and the associated lien on the blockchain transparently for other OEMs to see, how would anybody know that there was already a lien on a vehicle? And therefore, again, if you had a central database, you can have a VIN registered by the dealer, the money moves, every other user of the system would know that a lien had already been placed on that vehicle, and not to lend against that vehicle because it had already been lent against.
I think that would create a very large database, and actually very large, but I'll use as an example something I learned on Tuesday. The GIA database was breached. So why would I'm thinking from a trust standpoint, I would rather have something which is immutable, that I know no one can change. And that's the one thing I'd say there is a worry, the central database, who controls it?
Thanks. So for vehicle financing, I think one of the slides you had talked about permissioned ledger. Mm-hmm. So my question is this: for a permissioned ledger, there are going to be controls around who can participate. So the question is, who has that control? And do you see any danger that new accusations of new cartels could come from that control?
I think that's a very valid question. One of the, maybe from the India market, when we've been looking at it, it's a much more difficult thing to create the cartel, because in India they already have the identity question. It's not completely solved, but the Aadhaar does help a lot. So you can use that identity, to be able to match. But in another way, I think that this is more about experimenting. And if we don't start it this way, we'll never be able to understand what are the challenges that we will meet.
Just on a point on the last slide, the prototype you did for the agro-farming, is anything happening with that? Is it an idea to go forwards? Or?
Yes. We are due to present at FunFest in June, and the team is really looking to see, so we're prototyping, so we're going to create a live prototype to be able to deliver in June, and we're talking to, so this is more about creating a framework also. So the framework would be using the ledger, but then hanging out and letting people be able to choose in terms of how do they want their money, how do they, and there are certain ideas even about, could you now look to create an asset class based on the data that is there. The point of view is really, it's about bringing technology and creating the ability to test it. So we all talk about how great the blockchain is, and I do believe it is going to be great and it's going to change our lives. But if we can actually try to see in an environment where the frictions are not there, it'll be wonderful to see it work. So we are talking to people about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.